Section 29 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Li Jing. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1, by Cao Xueqin, translated by Henry Bancroft Jolly. Chapter 13, Part 2. In a short while, these three noblemen descended from their chairs, and Chia Cheng received them in the large hall. In like manner, all the relatives and friends arrived in such quick succession, one coming, another going, that it is impossible to remember even so much as their number. One thing need to be said, that during these 49 days the street on which the Ningguo mansion stood was covered with a sheet of white, formed by the people coming and going, and thronged with clusters of flowers, as the officials came and went. At the instance of Chia Cheng, Chia Rong the next day donned his gala dress and went over for his papers. And on his return the articles in use in front of the coffin, as well as those belonging to the cortege and other such things, were all regulated by the rules prescribed for an official status of the 5th degree, while on the tablet and notice alike the inscription consisted of "Spirit of Lady Ching, by marriage of the Chia mansion, and by patent a lady of the 5th rank of the titles of honor." The main entrance of the garden of concentrated fragrance, adjoining the street, was opened wide, and on both sides were raised sheds for the musicians, and two companies of players, dressed in blue, discoursed music at the proper times, while one pair after another of the paraphernalia was drawn out so straight as if cut by a knife or slit by an axe. There were also two large carmine boards, carved with gilt inscriptions, erected outside the gate, the designations in bold characters on the upper sides being "God of the imperial antechamber, charged with the protection of the inner palace and roads in the red prohibited city." On the opposite side, facing each other, rose, high above the ground, two altars for the services of the Buddhist and Taoist priests, while a placard bore the inscription in bold type: "Funeral obsequies of Lady Ching, by marriage of the Chia mansion, by patent a lady of the 5th rank, consort of the eldest grandson of the hereditary Duke of Ningguo, and guard of the imperial antechamber, charged with the protection of the inner palace and roads in the red prohibited city. We, Wan Xu, by heaven's commands, charged with the perennial preservation of perfect peace in the kingdom of the 4 continents, as well as the lands contained therein, head controller of the school of void and asceticism, and superior in chief of the Buddhist hierarchy, and Ye Sheng, principal controller, since the creation of the disciples of perfect excellence, and superior in chief of the Taoist priesthood, and others having in a reverent spirit purified ourselves by abstinence, now raise our eyes up to heaven, prostrate ourselves humbly before Buddha, and devoutly pray all the Jialans, Jiedis, Gongcaos, and other divinities to extend their sacred bounties, and from afar to display their spiritual majesty during the 49 days of the funeral rites, for the deliverance from judgment and the absolution from retribution of the spirit of Lady Ching, so that it may enjoy a peaceful and safe passage, whether by sea or by land, and other such prayers to this effect, which are in fact not worth the trouble of putting on record. Chia Cheng had, it is true, all his wishes gratified. But as his wife was laid up in the inner chambers, with a relapse of her old complaint, and was not in a fit state to undertake the direction of the ceremonies, he was very much distressed lest, when the high officials and their wives came and went, there should occur any breach of the prescribed conventionalities, which he was afraid would evoke ridicule. Hence it was that he felt in low spirits. But while he was plunged in solicitude, Pao-yü, who happened to be close by, readily inquired, "Everything may be safely looked upon as being satisfactorily settled, and why need you, elder brother, still be so full of concern?" Chia Cheng forthwith explained to him how it was that in the ladies' apartments there was no one to do the honors, but Pao-yü at these words smiled. "What difficulty is there about it?" he remarked. "I'll recommend some one to take temporary charge of the direction of things for you during the month, and I can guarantee that everything will be properly carried out." "Who is it?" Chia Cheng was quick to ask, but as Pao-yü perceived that there were still too many relatives and friends seated around, he did not feel as if he could very well speak out, so that he went up to Chia Cheng and whispered a couple of remarks in his ear. Chia Cheng's joy knew no bounds when he heard this suggestion. "Everything will indeed be properly carried out," he added laughingly, "but I must now be going at once." With these words, he drew Pao-yü along, and taking leave of the whole number of visitors, they forthwith came into the drawing rooms. This day was luckily not a grand occasion, so that few relatives and friends had come. In the inner apartments there were only a small number of ladies and close kinship. Mesdames Hsing and Wang, and lady Feng, and the women of the whole household, were entertaining the guests, when they heard a servant announce that Mr. Chia Chen had come. This announcement took the whole body of ladies and young ladies so much by surprise that, with a rushing sound, they tried to hide in the back rooms, but they were not quick enough to effect their escape. Lady Feng alone composedly stood up. Chia Cheng was himself at this time rather unwell, and being also very much cut up, he entered the room shuffling along, propping himself up with the staff. "You are not well," therefore remarked Madame Hsing and the others, "and you've had besides so much to attend to during those consecutive days, that what you require is rest to get all right, and why do you again come over?" Chia Cheng was, as he leant on his staff, straining every nerve to bend his body so as to fall on his knees and pay his respects to them, and express his sense of obligation for the trouble they had taken, when Madame Hsing and the other ladies hastily called Pao-yü to raise him up, bidding a servant move a chair for him to sit on. Chia Cheng would not take a seat, but making an effort to return a smile, "Your nephew," he urged, "has come over, as there's a favour that I want to ask of my two aunts as well as of my eldest cousin." "What is it?" promptly inquired Madame Hsing and the rest. "My aunts," Chia Cheng replied with all haste, "you surely are aware that your grandson's wife is now no more. Your nephew's wife is also laid up unwell, and, as I see that things in the inner apartments are really not what they should properly be, I will trouble my worthy eldest cousin to undertaking here the direction of affairs for a month, and if she does, my mind will be set at ease." Madame Hsing smiled. "Is it really about this that you've come?" she asked. "Your eldest cousin is at present staying with your aunt Secunda, and all you have to do is to speak to her, and it will be all right." "However could a mere child like her," speedily remonstrated Madame Wang, "carry out all these matters? And shouldn't she manage things properly, she will, on the contrary, make people laugh, so it would therefore be better that you should trouble some one else." "What your ideas are, aunt," rejoined Chia Chen smiling, "your nephew has guessed. You are afraid lest my eldest cousin should have to bear fatigue and annoyance; for as to what you say, that she cannot manage things, why my eldest cousin has, from her youth up, ever been in her romping and playing so firm and decided, and now that she has entered the married estate, and has the run of affairs in that mansion, she must have reaped so much the more experience, and have become quite an old hand. I've been thinking these last few days that outside my eldest cousin, there's no one else who could come to my help; and aunt, if you don't do it for the face of your nephew and your nephew's wife, do it, at least, for the affection you bore to her who is no more." While he uttered these words, tears trickled down his face. The fears that Madame Wang inwardly entertained were that lady Feng had no experience in funeral matters, and she apprehended that if she was not equal to managing them, she would incur the ridicule of others; but when she now heard Chia Chen make the appeal in such a disconsolate mood, she relented considerably in her resolution. But as she turned her eyes towards lady Feng to ascertain her wishes, she saw that she was plunged in abstraction. Lady Feng had all along found the greatest zest in taking the initiative in everything, with the idea of making a display of her abilities, so that when she perceived how earnest Chia Cheng was in his entreaties, she had, at an early period, made up her mind to give a favourable reply. Seeing besides Madame Wang show signs of relenting, she readily turned round and said to her, "My elder cousin has made his appeal in such a solicitous way that your ladyship should give your consent and have done with it." "Do you think you are equal to the task?" inquired Madame Wang in a whisper. "What's there that I couldn't be equal to?" replied lady Feng. "For urgent matters outside, my cousin may be said to have already made full provision, and all there is to be done is to keep an eye over things inside. But should there occur anything that I don't know, I can ask you, madame, and it will be right." Madame Wang, perceiving the reasonableness of what she heard her say, uttered not a word, and when Chia Chen saw that lady Feng had assented, "How much you do attend to I don't mind," he observed, forcing another smile, "but I must in any case entreat you, cousin, to assume the onerous charge. As a first step, I'll pay my obeisance to you in here, and when everything has been finished, I shall then come over into that mansion to express my thanks." With these words still on his lips, he made a low bow, but lady Feng had scarcely had time to return the compliment before Chia Chen had directed a servant to fetch the warrant of the Ning mansion, which he bade Pao-yü hand over to lady Feng. "Cousin," he added, "take whatever steps you think best, and if you want anything, all you have to do is to simply send for it with this, and there will even be no use to consult me. The only thing I must ask you is, not to be too careful in order to save my expense, for the main consideration is that things should be handsomely done. In the second place, it will be well if you were also to treat servants here in the same way as in the other mansion, and not to be too scrupulous in the fear that any one might take offence. Outside these two concerns, there's nothing else to disturb my mind." Lady Feng did not venture to take over the warrant at once, but merely turned round to ascertain what were Madame Wang's wishes. "In view of the reason brother Chen advances," Madame Wang rejoined, "you had better assume the charge at once and finish with it. Don't, however, act on your own ideas, but when there's aught to be done, be careful and send some one to consult your cousin's wife, ever so little though it be on the subject." Pao-yü had already taken over the warrant from Chia Chen's grasp and forcibly handed it to lady Feng. "Will you, cousin," he went on to question, "take up your quarters here, or will you come every day? Should you cross over day after day, it will be ever so much more fatiguing for you, so that I shall speedily have a separate court got ready for you in here, where you, cousin, can put up for these several days and be more comfortable." "There's no need," replied lady Feng smiling, "for on that side they can't do without me, and it will be better if I were to come daily." "Do as you like," Chia Chen observed, and after subsequently passing a few more irrelevant remarks, he at length left the room. After a time the lady relatives dispersed, and Madame Wang seized the opportunity to inquire of lady Feng, "What do you propose doing to day?" "You had better, please madame, go back," urged lady Feng, "for I must first of all find out some clue, before I can go home." Madame Wang, upon hearing these words, returned to her quarters, in advance, in company with madame Hsing, where we will leave them. Lady Feng, meanwhile, came into a colonnade, which enclosed a suite of 3 apartments, and taking a seat, she gave way to reflection. "The first consideration," she communed within herself, "is that the household is made up of mixed elements, and things might be lost. The second is that the preparations are under no particular control, with the result that, when the time comes, the servants might shirk their duties. The third is that, the necessary expenditure being great, there will be reckless disbursements and counterfeit receipts. The fourth, that with the absence of any distinction in the matter of duties, whether large or small, hardship and ease will be unequally shared. And the fifth, that the servants being arrogant, through leniency, those with any self-respect will not brook control, while those devoid of face will not be able to improve their ways." These 5 were, in point of fact, usages in vogue in the Ning mansion; but as you are unable, reader, to ascertain here how lady Feng set things right, listen to the explanations given in the following chapter. Section 29